The Glazers make a massive withdrawal from Manchester United, and Alice is going to go on a rant about the Glazers. Everything they're doing that's not being mentioned a lot by mainstream media, because mainstream media have got to be PR's been controlled in a loop by the Glazers. We're going to talk about Sir Ratcliffe. Is he being mugged off? A few questions pending his ownership, some big problems that could happen with Sir Jim. That isn't his fault, but is Joel Glazer basically taking advantage of him? And then we're going to be talking about Manchester United's midfield transfer targets. They're linked to some interesting people. Who is Paul Mitchell lining up? Who is this person that we're linked to, and more? So please do hit that like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new, and let's get into the video. So I'm sure you saw this article by James Ducker. He said the Glazers are set to pocket around 650 million from the sale of their Class B shares to Sir Jim Ratcliffe. The other half of the estimated 1.3 billion will go to non-Glazer shareholders. So it's not like Sir Jim has brought 25% off the Glazers, because if Sir Jim had brought 25% off the Glazers, they would own about 45% of the club. He's only taken about 12.5%. But he's only taking about 12.5% of their shares, so they're still going to own about 58% of the club. So essentially, Ratcliffe has brought 12.5% of shares that aren't the Glazers and 12.5% of the Glazers shares. So the Glazers basically sit there. They get £650 million. That's 100 million each from Ratcliffe, over 100 million each from Ratcliffe, and they only lose 12% of the club. And on top of that, they have got Ratcliffe, who's going to invest 300 million in doing everything that needs to be done to the stadium. He's going to be improving the infrastructure. Ratcliffe's going to be pumping money into the January window, so that the Glazers are just going to get 650 million each, have probably money there to take out dividends, and expect Ratcliffe to pay off the debt, build the stadium, all of that. I mean, I think Ratcliffe's a bit stupid, but he desperately wanted the club. But it makes me angry. 30 million out in dividends nearly every year. They're now getting over 100 million out in dividends, and they're losing 12% of the club. That makes no difference. 12% of the club makes no difference. It's just the Glazers going, we can get 100 million each and still have the club for longer and rinse more and more money out United. If it was 25%, that's a large chunk of the Glazers, and then Sir Jim Ratcliffe would actually have somewhat control. But he still doesn't have much control. He might have 25%, but the Glazers will still have about 56, 57% of control of the club, because he's bought 12.5% of non-Glazer shares, which is just infuriating. And obviously they're going to get more money, and obviously hopefully Ratcliffe eventually buys the Glazers out, but it's the fact that they're going to get 650 million. Not a single penny of it is going to be invested back in the club. They'll get 100 million each on top of the dividends they take out, and they get to stay at United, have power, and dictate how this club goes for years. It was also said by James Ducker that John Murtaugh's position is understood to be vulnerable. Dougie Freeman and Paul Mitchell are among early contenders to become the director of football once Ratcliffe has his head of sport at Ineos. In addition to purchase price, Ratcliffe is understood to be committed to around 250 million in staggering investments for the club's infrastructure needs. So essentially, they've basically got someone to put 250 million that's needed to be done into the infrastructure of the club, give them 650 million, 100 million each, so they can stay at the club even longer and rinse more money out of the club. And you've got to remember, Darcy, Kevin, Brian, they didn't want to stay at the club. They wanted to take that 6 billion from Qatar and adios. But Joel Glazer, he had a good offer there from Qatar. Avram Glazer had a good offer there from Qatar. Even though I wouldn't want the Glazers to profit 5 billion from United when they didn't buy it for a single penny and didn't invest any money in United. Had Qatar gone, here's your 5 billion, adios, get out, they'd be gone. But basically, Joe and Avram know that if Sir Jim gives them the same amount of money as Qatar, but then allows them to stay longer so they can rinse the club, take out more dividends, and see if the club value goes up, they can make even more money out of United. Because it's not like the 650 million they're getting from Ratcliffe they're going to go and buy a transfer with. Not at all. They're going to just use that to spend more money. I mean, who needs 100 million each? They've already taken billion out of United. Joel Glazer's probably himself had about 300 million taken out United. Why do you need another 100 million? And then on top of that, another 100 million, you'll get another 100 million, and another 100 million, then another 100 million as Ratcliffe eventually buys you out. It is just agreed. You had an opportunity to leave and be done with the club, and you will actually rather stay at the club that no one wants you here, just so you can make maybe 30, 40 million more through Ratcliffe, because it's Joe and Abraham's greed. And I did a big rant about this. They brought the club on debt. They've not invested a single penny into the club. People say they've spent money. No. They never even brought the club with their money. They brought it on borrowed money debt, which they've not essentially paid back, have they? They've used the money the club generates to pay back. They've not invested a single penny. So they never even paid for the club, essentially. They've not invested a single of their own penny into the club. The debt is now at 1 billion. We had zero debt before the Glazers were here. The debt is rising because they won't pay it off. And then they'll just, the club can pay off. It's the club's problem, not mine. 30 million annual dividends taken out of the club pretty much every year to pay themselves and shareholders. They put the club on the stock market so they could profit from the club. They've let the stadiums rot, the facilities rot. We're the only team in the Premier League without proper screen. We're the only team in the Premier League where the stadium's actually just rusting and it's got leaks. We are, in terms of infrastructure, for the biggest club in England, for one of the richest clubs in the world, we have got the worst infrastructure in the Premier League. Cristiano Ronaldo came out and said it's not changed in 18 years. The facilities, anything, it's not changed in 18 years. It's really outdated. It's like, when you have your grandma, I don't know, I did, and the house is all like the same as it probably was in the 1960s furniture and all of that. That's the Glazers. They haven't changed anything. And it's like, well, you need to change things because there's new technology in football. It becomes modern. They've not invested anything apart from, okay, they have to invest a bit of money in covering a leak or improving their toilets, but they've not actually put any real investment into the facility, stadium and infrastructure for 18 years. And then the way this sport develops, Tottenham Stadium, Man City Stadium, how can you not really actually make any major improvements in 18 years when this is such a big thing in football facilities? When you wonder why we get so many injuries, when you don't even let the managers change the medical staff when they come in or do any of that, because that's going to cost you money. Anyway, continuing on, they've employed their friends / bankers, the Bristol Bankers Accounting Club, to basically operate the footballing and recruitment side of Manchester United for multiple years. Matt Judge and Ed Woodward, they were complete friends of the Glazers. They knew nothing about football. They were replaced with Murtagh and Arnold, which were an improvement on Matt Judge and Ed Woodward. But Murtagh and Arnold, again, have admitted they're rugby people. They're not big football people. They're financial guys who have no real interest in football and big knowledge, as you can see with the money we spent on transfers. Stupidly, people say, oh, the Glazers spent 1.4 billion. Oh, the Glazers spent 1.4 billion. But they just haven't. They've basically given incompetent people money to spend 1.4 billion on players that the manager didn't want. Doesn't sell the players that the manager wants sold. It's complete shambles how this club is run. Continuing on, the Glazers were the ringleaders behind the European Super League idea. They got 6 billion from Qatar and they basically turned that down. They knew that the fans wanted them gone. They got 6 billion from Qatar to fuck off. 4 of the Glazers were like, yeah, let's take that. The other 2 went, no, let's see if we can get more money. Dragged this takeover on for a year. Basically told loads of staff that we can't give you job certainty for over a year. Played with staff, played with emotion, played with tenor, played with the squad, played with the fans, just so they could get what they wanted all along, is someone to go in and give them an investment so they can stay at the club. Because they can't stay at the club because of the financial situation. They knew they had to sell or get a minority investor in. So they played this whole game. They completely played this whole game of sale, strung along Qatar, strung along fans, everyone at the club for a year. But deep down, this whole time, they just wanted a minority investor. They've been looking for a minority investor for 3 years, couldn't get it. So they used the sale facade. And then Jim Ratcliffe went from 100% to 69% to then 50%. And then they just knew they could play him down to 25%. And they got what they wanted. They never wanted to sell the club. They wanted someone who was stupid enough to give them the money to stay at the club so they could profit hundreds of millions to stay at the club, while that person will also do everything that they needed to do with the money, which is improve the stadium. It's not like they've been given 650 million and now they have to spend that on improving the stadium and paying off the debt. No, they've been given 650 million. None of that needs to go back into the club because Sergeant Ratcliffe's going to pay off the debt and Sergeant Ratcliffe's going to improve the stadium with an additional 250 million on top of this. I'd look at Sergeant Ratcliffe, I think, absolute mug. But it just grinds me. I just think they should never have been able to own this football club. Never, ever, ever. 650 million, over 100 million each. They still get control of the club. That money that they get from Jim isn't going to be invested back in the club because Jim has to use his own money on top of that to do the stadium. So it's not like they've got all this money and now they have to use it to pay for the stadium. They just get pure profit on top of the dividends. And I just think, they brought zero to this club, invested zero into this club. And then, what do they do? Zero in the club. Zero invested into the club. They've taken over $1 billion out of the club and counting. By the time they leave the club, they're going to have about 4 or 5 billion in their pockets when they never spent any money in the club. They borrowed money to buy the club and then put that debt on the club. So the club will basically pay off the price that they paid for the club. So they basically never bought the club, made 5 billion out of the club and left. Absolute parasites. Absolute parasites. And this begs me into some questions. about Ratcliffe. You know, Ratcliffe's got sporting control and he's going to bring in Paul Mitchell and he's going to bring in Blanc, which is brilliant. But he's still on a board with Joel Glazer. How much control is Ratcliffe going to get if Joel Glazer's only given up 12.5% of shares? Any investment that comes in from the club will come from Jim. But I still think he's being mugged off by the Glazers because, yes, I'm really happy that Paul Mitchell and Blanc are coming in and that's massive for the club and that needs to happen. But if the Glazers are still owning more than 50% of the club and he's still on a board with Joel Glazer, even if Sir Jim's got sporting control, how much control will Sir Jim have? How much control will Paul Mitchell and Blanc have to be allowed to run the club properly? We still don't know what's going to happen to the debt, and we still don't know how Sir Jim is actually going to buy out the rest of the shares, and if he's going to buy out the rest of the shares. We believe he will. There's still so many unanswered questions, and those Glazers make me sick. People, do hit that like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new, because we're going to quickly dive into some transfer news. So it was said today that Manchester United are interested in AS Monaco midfielder Youssouf Fofana, and they're in a race with Juventus and PSG, all of that. Now, what's he at Monaco? Where did Paul Mitchell at Monaco? Easy link, yes. But Fabrizio Romano linked us to this guy in the summer. He said that United were looking at this guy. Fofana, Onana, Palacios, definite targets. So Manchester United, definite targets. Andre's definitely one to keep an eye on among many others. And then, interestingly, as United had said, and he said this a couple of weeks ago, he said, to follow up, I got some names that are being evaluated by United. Here are the concrete targets: Onana, Fofana, Ilicic, João Neves, Dewsbury Fall, and Benina. Didn't hear anything about Palacios, but that could be a person telling me as well, because United Muppet and a few other sources of Palacios. But Onana, Fofana, João Neves, keep an eye on them. Even keep an eye on the likes of Andre, maybe. I think United will bring in 2 midfielders in the summer. Hopefully, depending on who we sell and depending on budget. I think we need a 6. I think we need an 8. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I have to say, Sir Jim Ratcliffe is the idiot that's enabling the Glazers to stay. Sir Jim Ratcliffe's obviously just very desperate for Man United and will just do anything to get Man United. He's desperate. But it angers me how the Glazers are just the way they rinse money out of this club. So I just wanted to do a rant about it. Anyway, please do smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.